Hi, and welcome to episode 57 of Small Business Stories. Today, I am blessed to be sharing the screen with the beautiful Jenny from Innovate Support Coordination and Innovative Disability Solutions. Two very different but complementary businesses that she's created for herself. Thank you so much for joining us, Jenny.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure. So please share with us all how, I guess, your whole journey started.
Yep. So I was in the early childhood sector for over 30 years. So loved the early childhood space, loved being a teacher, a director, head of department for TAFE, loved working with families, connecting them to community and all those sorts of things. I also have 3 children, 2 whom have a disability, and it's quite a severe disability. So they are on the autism spectrum, level 3. They have an intellectual delay. They are nonverbal, and they're also incontinent. So there's a lot of care and time and need around that. So that's very demanding. And towards the end of my career in early childhood, I was teaching 3 days a week at a service where there were a lot of children who had behaviour, displayed behaviours of concern or aggressive behaviour, that sort of thing. And then I was coming home to the same thing as well. So I was really burnt out towards the end. And we were also seeing families that were on the NDIS, had the NDIS package, and didn't have either the ability to advocate for their child or for themselves if they were the participant, and just didn't know where to find services. And so you'd have children coming into the service and they'd have a package and they just weren't using it because their parents just either didn't have the skill to understand it, to implement it. And early intervention is so important for children's development. Those first 5 years and getting that early intervention in that time before they go to school is so important. It can make a lifelong difference. So I was really frustrated that families and other people that we knew on the NDIS didn't have an understanding or a support. And so I actually started my own business, which is the Innovate Support Coordination. And in that, I'm a support coordinator and I connect NDIS participants to the services they need. So they will come to me and say, this is my plan. And, if they need support workers or a speech therapist, an OT, I help them to connect with those, giving them choice and control as well, as much as there is in our smaller country sort of areas. Even in Wagga, it's hard to find, the services. Sometimes it's, this is all that's, especially with therapists, there's not a great deal available. So I, finished up in the early childhood sector and moved into doing the support coordination. And just recently we've moved into providing care coordination for aged care, home care recipients as well. So that's just another little leg that we're sort of added, because the NDIS is forever changing and saying we won't have support coordination anymore, but then it's still there. And it's been going on for years. So I just thought, well, when this opportunity came up, I thought it makes sense to give that a go as well. But when I left the early childhood sector, I was really frustrated with educators not understanding the needs of parents who had a child living with a disability or who were not wanting to get their child diagnosed or not wanting to go down that road. And it's simply that you don't know what you don't know. So those educators couldn't understand what it was like to receive that diagnosis or to even start thinking about going down that track. So I wrote a book called Embracing Disability in Early Childhood, specifically for early childhood educators. So at the beginning, it's talking about what it's like to receive that diagnosis, stages of grief that parents or families will go through, and then talking about how to have those hard conversations, because no matter how long you're in the early childhood sector, having a conversation with the parent saying, we've got some concerns about your child's development, it's never easy. It's never an easy conversation to have. And unfortunately in the sector, sometimes it is, because there's sort of staff shortages and things like that, it can be an educator who doesn't have a lot of experience actually having to have those conversations. And that's not ideal for the family or the educator, but sometimes that is the reality. So that's included in the book, and then a little bit about the NDIS, because that's another area that educators or anybody that's not involved in that sector doesn't, in the NDIS space, you don't understand, because it's like any, government sort of thing. If you're not in it, you don't understand. And then when I did a few book launches, there were questions from those. And I thought, okay, there's a need here. They're wanting more information. So then I developed some workshops that I've been doing at different services in New South Wales. So yeah, it's probably a long explanation, but that's how I got here.
I love it. And I'm sitting here nodding my head as a trained early childhood educator myself. I do remember being very early, in my journey as an early childhood educator, having to have some of those really hard conversations with families. And it's actually quite confronting, because I guess, and I found it quite confronting, because I have also experienced the flip side, not directly, but I have a cousin who has cerebral palsy. So I have watched that whole journey with my uncle and aunt, and navigating all of that with their daughter. And so I guess I was coming from a place of, a small level of understanding of, as you spoke about, the grief that comes with those sorts of diagnoses, the uncertainty of, what the future is going to look like, what sort of support are we going to need, how are we actually going to get that support, and to know that, there are now resources out there like your book to support educators, is something that I think is really vital.
Yes, I've been nodding along with everything that you said as well. Yes, because it's like going on a roller coaster ride that basically those parents never get off until, probably the end of their life, really, or their child's life, because unfortunately some children with a disability will pass away, prior to their parents. So you are setting them off on a roller coaster ride that they're just never going to get off. And for the educators, when you leave at the end of the day, you get to leave that, but that family doesn't have that. And even when they are at, whether preschool or long daycare, they're still thinking about it. And I know the level of, I guess, that concern or that thought, that energy that went into it was much more for our boys than it was for our daughter, because she did really well at school. She, coped really well, all that sort of thing. So there's just all those sort of layers and complexities that educators don't always think about, because if you haven't lived it, you don't know it, But if I can, talk to them about that, it just changes that level of understanding. And sometimes that can be all they need to change how they might approach a family, and that can just change everything. That family then might open up to them more, or actually, go and look at, early intervention. I've also developed a workshop for parents, which is around early intervention, talking about what it is, how it can support their child and that sort of thing. Because I did have a service that had a lot of children that needed to access early intervention, and the educators were talking to the parents, doing all the right things, but it just, the next step wasn't happening. So we hoped that by doing that, they could see the benefits for their child, basically, and go, okay, let's start this process. Because I mean, as an educator, you could have a conversation with them when the child is, say, 2 years old, but by the time, and if the parent's on board straight away, it still takes a year, 18 months to get to a pediatrician. And then by the time, you can actually get services, they're almost at school, and they've just, lost all that time where they could have had just so much important input and intervention that would make a huge difference to them. So, yeah, it's sort of, I guess, getting the families and the educators working together.
Because that early diagnosis, that early intervention really does make all the difference. And, as I said, being in that industry, I've seen it firsthand, and it really is vital to the kids, really, and their development, to get the support that they need. And as you said, to the families as well. Nobody really, wants to sometimes admit that their child's got some issues that they need some support with. But by acknowledging them, that's the first step. And then you can actually get the support that you need, because as a parent with a child with, some extra needs, having that support network makes all of the difference.
Oh, yes, makes a huge difference. And sometimes some children may only need, 2 years of speech therapy, and, they're sort of ready to go to school and cope really well and all those sorts of things. But it's, making sure that they access that early enough. That is so vital.
And I guess having people around them, like early childhood educators, like support coordinators, to help them navigate those systems, because, as you said, unless you're in those systems working with them, and the constant changes and adaptations that happen within those systems, it's really hard to keep on top of and understand, what you can and can't do within the parameters of those supports.
Yes. And unfortunately, with the NDIS, they have the early intervention program. It used to be 0 to 7. They've extended to 0 to 9. But quite often those children won't be given support coordination funding. So they do have, they're given funding for therapies and things. But once again, if they don't understand how to use it, they're not using it. So if the services, the early childhood educators, understand a little bit about the NDIS, then they can say, well, this is how you can use it, this is what you can do with it, and help them to connect to those therapists. Because it's early childhood services, we always know the therapists in our area and that sort of thing. And also telehealth is, really good. And some children it works for, some it doesn't. That just depends. So it's knowing who to talk to and who to be able to get that information from that is so important for educators, because then they can support the families.
Because typically your early childhood educators are the first touch point for families, after they've had their children. If it's not the early childhood nurse, it's, it's the early childhood educators that are, those initial touch points for families and their children.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they've got that knowledge, and even if it's only a little bit of knowledge, to be able to say, well, this is what you're able to do, or, contact this person, it just makes, that journey for the parents just so much easier. And, having answers, you can move forward. And sometimes you just need one answer, and then if you follow that up, then you get another one, and it's just an ongoing cycle, and you finally get where you need to be.
Yeah. As you said, it's a bit like a roller coaster. You get on, and you're on it forever.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, but like I said, knowing that you've got people that can support you along that whole journey makes the journey a lot less daunting, a lot less scary, and a lot less lonely. Like, often I feel
Yes.
that families feel quite isolated and alone in their issues, because, as you said, as an early childhood educator, we deal with it for this much of the day. The family deal
Mm.
with it all the day, and it's a never ending kind of thing, like when you have children that will, get to a point where they'll grow up and leave home. That's not a reality for some families, that they know that they've got their children, as you said, until, either, they pass, or sadly if their
Mm.
child passes, like,
Mm.
and that's a big responsibility.
It is, and especially as you age as well.
Mm.
And you don't get to have those retirement plans or holidays or breaks that other families have. You don't engage in community activities as much, or sometimes at all. Like, we really didn't do any community activities. If there was, the Easter egg hunt in the park at Easter, or Australia Day celebrations, we didn't go to those because our boys just couldn't cope with the noise, the sensory issues, and really weren't interested or didn't really understand what it was all about. So there was really, no point in going. So as a family, if we wanted our daughter to be engaged in anything, then we just had to do that separately with her. So there's not a lot of always family time for some families. It works for some families. They can do it. It just depends on the disability. But yeah, it is something to be aware of for those families that often families would say, oh, or the other educators would say to me, oh, what are you doing on the long weekend? Nothing, because you just stay home and you keep your same routine because you just don't change it. So it's sometimes just being aware of those things as well, that how difficult it is sometimes just to do the everyday things like the shopping. I mean, online shopping is just a blessing now for families that children who are on the spectrum and just can't cope with going to a supermarket and things like that. But yeah, it's ducking to the shops and just getting a bottle of milk can be just a huge drama for a family that might have a child or children living with a disability. So it just multiplies the complexity, and I think for educators to be aware of that and thinking about their conversations, and maybe how they can sometimes maybe ask different questions, or think about if there's any solutions that they can provide for those families.
So can you tell us a bit more about both of your individual businesses, and what they actually, what you actually have to offer in each of those businesses, and how people can actually go about working with you, contacting you in relation to both of those businesses?
Yep. So with the support coordination, we will have NDIS participants that contact us and say, hey, we're looking for a support coordinator. Sometimes it will be the local LAC or even the NDIS planner that will call us and say, we've got a participant that needs support coordination. So we always meet with the participant first to make sure that they're happy to work with us, because sometimes you click with people, sometimes you don't. So, and we don't want to work with somebody that doesn't feel comfortable with us, and vice versa. It's not going to be a good relationship if you don't feel comfortable with them. And then after that initial meeting, we look at what is in their plan, what services they need. Sometimes people are already set up with their services and they're happy. Sometimes we know of other services out there and we think, oh, that service would really suit that person, and so we might suggest it, but they don't need to take us up on that suggestion. They might meet with that provider and go, actually, no, I don't want to do that, and that's fine. So it's all very individualized, and around their needs. And it's just making sure that they're aware of the providers in their area and, you know, and what they provide. And sometimes some participants don't realise that they could actually have two providers to do their community, social and community access. So they think they just have to stick, you know, with the one, but you can actually have, you know, 2, 3, whatever you want. Obviously, too many doesn't work, but yeah, you can have different providers because they do different activities, provide different things, different support workers. You might, you know, feel really comfortable with that support worker taking you to like appointments or you know, doctor's appointments, things like that. You might have somebody else that it's really good to, you might enjoy going to a pottery class and having somebody support you doing that, or helping you do your shopping, your everyday things, or somebody helping you, you know, do your things around the house. So it's making sure that they're aware that they have choice and control in what they want to choose. And with the care coordination, as I said, we're just sort of moving into that space, but it is very similar, making sure that we're connecting those recipients of that package to services that help them stay at home for longer. Basically, that's the aim of it. So yeah, just and doing all that connecting and the phone calling and all those sorts of things that they might find a little bit daunting. It might be you know, difficult for them. They might have you know, hearing problems, and they might find making, you know, phone calls difficult because they can't always hear, you know, using technology and things like that. So it's finding, once again, finding the right person for them. Sometimes they will also, they say, oh, you know, my neighbours, you know, my friend's got so and so through, you know, her home care package to do her lawn mowing. He does a really good job. Can I have him? And it's like, yeah, go for it. You know, you connect them to who they want, and just making sure that the service is consistent, that if they're meant to be there every week, they're coming every week. And if they can't come one day, they contact us and say, look, we can't get there Friday, and so we each organise a replacement. So making sure that those services are consistent and just keeping in touch to make sure that they're well and, you know, they're not requiring anything else. We always develop just really good relationships with our clients. I think it's like in early childhood, you know, with your families, you've got to have those relationships. And yeah, they sort of, our clients know as much about our family as we do about theirs, because it's what you do. You share and you build that relationship, and you know the important people and their lives, and you know them, what they like, they don't like, and that's how you match them up to providers that you think will be right for them, because you know their likes, their dislikes, all those sorts of things. So to get in touch, my number is 0447 604 180, or there is our website, which is Innovate Support Coordination, and there is a little button on there where you can send in a referral. So yeah, so either way, but yeah, happy to take a phone call, because it's always nice to chat to people as well and just get a feel for what they're looking for.
And those links and contact details are on your, I would assume, on your Instagram and Facebook pages as well, if, you know, if that's how people are having to come across. Yep. Very good.
And then what was the question again? What I'm telling you what I'm doing.
Your
Sorry.
other in innovative disability solutions, what you do there and what you have to offer for that arm of your business.
Oh dear, I think I talked so long. I forgot where I was going. So yes, I have my book available there. So, you know, that can be for educators, it can be for parents. Parents may want to buy it as a resource for their their early childhood service that they're attending, to learn a little bit about the NDIS. There are also stories in there, like my story of diagnosis, but stories from 3 other parents as well who have have a diagnosis. Their child has a diagnosis, sorry. So it is nice to hear about other people and how they've received their diagnosis and what, I guess, their reaction was and how they've sort of dealt with that. So that's available there. I did also write a chapter for a book called Stories from the Heart, and that's a group of all mums who wrote, about their child's diagnosis or their disability in their life. So that's available there as well. And then, as I said, from doing the book launches, I found that there were so many questions that educators had, and there just seemed to be a lack of knowledge, that I developed the workshop. So there's one called Understanding Autism, and that's the one I'll be doing this afternoon in Cooma. So it is an explanation of what autism is, the characteristics, and then looking at the strengths and capabilities of children and people on the autism spectrum, and then looking at how they can best support them in that early childhood setting once they know what those characteristics and maybe triggers for behaviour are, so then they can better support the children that are in their service. Another workshop is called Learning Spaces to Support Sensory Regulation. So this is it's sort of a two-part workshop. I go to a service and look at how their children are engaging in the environment, what might be affecting their learning, what sensory triggers there might be, and then I will write up a report about what triggers that I've seen, and especially relating to different children, that they will say, oh, this child, this is what's happening. And then I go back to the service about a month later and we go through the report, but also there's a PowerPoint that talks about what sensory regulation is, what sensory triggers there are, and how to support children. So just really practical ideas on what they might change or could add. And it's really good to see the educators, they really get engaged, going, oh, that's so-and-so, that's why, oh, we could do this. And it's really interesting, because often, an adult there that'll have either, an autism diagnosis, or, they will have sensory issues, and they go, that's why I do. Or, then their co-educators, they start to go, oh, that's why you're doing that. Or, okay, I get now why you really, really hate it when we put the, the lavender oil on, or, spray the Glen 20 or something like that. So it's really good to see them engaging in the workshops, because they'll start to have those conversations about their children, and linking it all together. So that then they go away, and I've had feedback that they then go away and they put it into place straight away. I actually had a service, and they just I think probably 75% of the children in one of their rooms had behaviour issues, and so that was a huge report. But I just suggested some sort of really simple little changes they could make, and they had put those in place. And by the time I went back a month later to do the workshop, they were saying how those changes, what the positive effects were. They said, we put this into place, and it's worked. We've noticed they're calmer, and those sorts of things, and they're engaging better during the day and things like that. So that's really positive feedback to have. But I'm just so glad that for those children, just their everyday life became a little bit easier, and they just had more opportunity to learn and engage. So, and then they would have had better relationships with their peers and, with their educators as well. So, and then another workshop is hard conversations, disability, communication, and it's got another word in it. I have gone blank. Can't remember, but anyway, it's talking about what it is like to receive that diagnosis, and then how families can, educators can have those hard conversations with families, and they'll often ask, about specific families or parents that they're saying, we're doing this, but we're not getting, sort of not getting anywhere. They're not engaging with us, and so we just talk through different solutions that might work. But they sort of go away with that understanding and looking at it from the parent perspective rather than just their educator perspective. And I will say, hey, look, I get it. I've, been that educator, and you're talking, you're getting nowhere. And they just, they'll listen, but then they'll just go, no, look, they're fine. We're just, and you just think, oh my goodness, this child, if they just had that year of speech therapy, it would just be enough to, sort of solve any issues that they have. So that's that one. And then the one for parents for the early intervention, just talking about what early intervention is, the benefits of it, and how to engage with an early intervention service, and looking at what services are available in their area. Did that one in Pambula last week, and the parents were amazing. They really engaged and shared information that they had about different services. And obviously that's not my area, so I had researched what was there. But because they live there, they knew things that hadn't popped up. And so they were giving each other all these different information. They said, oh, we need to do, set up, sort of like a Facebook group for parents. And they were really, really keen. And it wasn't just for their preschool, they were looking at their whole community. So it's really good to see that sort of change happening, and that positivity and just that sharing of information. They all got so much from it. So yeah, that's that. Phone number's still the same, 0447 604 or yes, on Instagram. The email address is idsinquiries@outlook.com. So
yeah. Wow, so much great information there. So much. I can see there's so much passion about actually just connecting people with the supports that they need to really thrive in life. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. Something that I feel, we have in common is that whole connection piece, that to be able to connect people with other people and services that are going to support them in the life that they really want to live for themselves. So thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. If you are local to the Wagga area and you are looking for, a support coordinator or an aged care provider, get in touch with Jenny. If you're a childcare centre, as you can see from, Cooma to Pambula, Wagga, Jenny will travel. So don't be afraid to reach out if you feel that, having some of these workshops or conversations within your services are going to be helpful for you and your team. Please reach out to Jenny and have a conversation with her about what sort of workshops or supports she can help you with. So yeah, thank you again.
Thank you.